Begin the current Daf Mesechta Yevamos Daf Ches. Begin 12 lines down at the top of the Amud, where Gemara continues the discussion regarding explaining the necessity of Aleha. Why do you have to say that from Aleha it says Aleha by Chaisish, it says Aleha by Eishasach, just like Aleha by Eishasach, it's B'makom Mitzvah Yibum, so to the Isser of Erba Chaisisha, it's B'makom Mitzvah Yibum, to tell me that you cannot do Yibum by an Erva. Of course, it's a legislation for course. Why would I have entertained to say that you could go ahead and do Yibum that I need a leah to exclude from that? That's how Gemara continues with another interpretation. Today's Daf. Some things we discuss in today's Daf are what's, like we said, the need for Aleha to teach the Isra of performing Yibum with an Erva. Why do we need Aleha? Because, like we said, why would I need that? So we explained on the end of the previous Daf, entry number 1. We had said a concept known as Hol the Ishtri. Since we already matter the Isra of Erva by Eishasach, so once it's permitted, we brought a raya from this halacha about a Balkari on day 8 of Tzaras, that even though Mitzvah could go in, but Balkari cannot, we said, okay, Hol the Ishtri. Now the Gemara said, but that only applies in a case where the Chazil is the Beni. Meaning, if the first Isra was already lifted before the second Isra came into effect, as in the case of Mitzvah, we said Mitzvah has to purify himself 7 days, and then in the morning of the 8th day, that's b'shosh rula b'karban. The moment already it's the break of dawn. He's after the carbon Talmud is brought. He can bring his carbon. So then he's allowed to stick his yodav into the behind. When 11 o'clock in the morning, let's say when he sees Keri Baba Yom and he didn't bring his carbon yet, but that you could say, you're already permitted to stick in your behind. So ishtiri can be permitted even for the Keri that subsequently came. But let's say we said if he would have had Keri B'leil Shemini, so it wasn't a time that he could bring his carbon yet, so he was never allowed to stick his yad into the behind us. So then actually we're not going to say Hav Ishtri. It's going to be forbidden because he had his Keri B'leil Shemini. You wouldn't say Hav Ishtri. So similarly by Yibum, when it's Nasa Meis Umeis, what does it mean Nasa Meis? It means the brother was going to end up dying. He married one sister first and then he died. And then Nasa Chai, and only after that did Shimon marry his sister-in-law became sister-in-law 2.0. It was his sister-in-law because he was married to his brother. And after his brother died, then he went and he married this sister. So the moment his brother died, before he married the sister, this Eishasach became mutter because of Yibum. Oh, so then you're going to say that the Achais Ishtoi is also going to be permitted because she was already permitted for Eishasach. So Hoyel Ishtri. Because the Chazil Beini. Migdishri is his Eishasach. You already permitted this Eishasach. He didn't marry the sister yet. His brother was married to one woman. He died. So it's Nasa Meis Umeis. So this Eishasach is permitted over here because the mitzvah of Yibum. Now, before doing Yibum, he marries the sister. Now, this woman is also a Chaisishtoi. Okay, that's similar to Ula's principle of you're already permitted the Erva Eishasach, so I'm going to permit also that of a Chaisishtoi. It was only in such a case that we need a leha to teach, and it's like very anticlimactic because the whole sugi we're handling all these bled. What's a leha? This is the answer number 1. You need a leha for such a case when the brother went and he died before the brother created the erva of let's say achais ishtay. That's where you need to say that it's still going to be usher for yibum based on leha. Because I would have said hoyav ishtari since the ishasach is permitted, so achais ishtay is also permitted. But let's say in the case of Nasa Meis V'loi Meis, Reuven married Sarah. So this Shimon's Aser because of Eishasach. But before Reuven died, Shimon married the sister. Oh, in that situation, or many different cases, for some reason I have a lot of slides of the same case, where you lo'echazi le'klal. You never were permitted that Isser of Eishasach because you married the sister before the brother died. Oh, so now you're not going to say Ishri. In such a case, we don't need to say allowed to teach that she's asa b'yibum because it's an erva of leiseish b'karas. Why would we never ended up proving I say dechel leiseish b'karas? So why would I need a leha to tell you that you can't? The only reason why we said was hoyel ishtiri, but it was never ishtiri. You never had a heter of yibum for such a woman. She was already an erva of achais ishtiri before the brother died. It's only when the brother died before he married the sister. So then it was already permitted, like the Balkari, who in the morning of the 8th day of Tzaras, he was already permitted, and then instead of 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock in the morning, he has Keri. Okay, but you already were permitted to bring you behind the sin. But if you had Keri on the night of the 8th day, for example, before you were able to put in your behind we wouldn't say Ishti. That was the case of Aleha that we needed to say that I would have said Hal Vishter Ishtri, and that we're not going to say Hal Vishter Ishtri. That's answer number one. Now the Gemara continues again, 12 line down at the top of the Amud. If you want to say a second shot, why we need a leha to tell me that you cannot do yibum by the arayis like by a chayis ishtay? Because had the Torah not written a leha, I would have said that Asya, you should learn out that you do yibum by a chayis isha, that it's going to be permitted. The hekesh of the Rabbi Yomi, from the hekesh of Rabbi Yomi, which is mentioned many times, called hekesh of Rabbi Yomi. Then Rabbi Yomi says, "Bitam misam seir Rabbi the bread of Yeshua." Amakra, the pasuk says in the Yikra, whoever's going to do any one of these abominations, meaning from these old parsha barayis there in Achri Mais, and he's going to get benechus, he's going to get kares. What's kikol asher yasim mikol atebes? So hukshu kol arayis kulan. All the arayis are compared one to the other. Now, Rashi points out that the halacha that Rabbi Yomi brings it on is actually regarding hara, which is regarding partial penetration in Perikabal Yevimtar. We're saying that the halacha of hara is only said regarding one of them, but since they're all compared, we compared for that they're all going to have this halacha of the issa of the erva is going to be not with the gemar bia, even with just hara. Now, but here also we would have thought to say they're all compared le'eshesach to the erva of eshesach, which is ma eshesach sharia, just like the brother's wife is permitted. That's an erva. That the mitzvah even says you're allowed to get married. Oh, Avkal Arayis, Namishayan. So to all Arayis are also going to be permitted. Now, although Eshesach has only one Isser of Eshesach, but any other erva, let's say Bitoy or Chais Ishtay, has two Isurim, because besides being the brother's wife, it's also your wife's sister or your daughter, whatever one of the Arayis it is. But that says Rashi, Imashivan ala Hekesh. It's a Hekesh. We know what a Talmudic dictum is, you can't ask questions on the Hekesh. You could ask questions on the Kabbalah, but Emashivan al Hekesh. So therefore, Kazach man aleh, that's why you have to write aloud, because else you would have thought to say we're going to compare it to Eshazach. So and therefore it would be permitted. Allah tells me no, but Moka Mitzvah you cannot do yibum. However, the Gemara asks, according to the conclusion of Aleha, Amalei Rav Acha b'difti l'Ravina. He says, Mechti, let's see. Kol arayis, all the arayis of the Mishnah. You could compare it to the brother's wife to say it's permitted for Yibum. And you could also compare it to La Chaisisha, to that of a Chaisisha, to say that it's going to be forbidden to do Yibum, because only by a Chaisisha did the pasuk specify this halacha of Allah. So Maichaz is when you see fit to Akshat La Chaisisha. Why are you comparing all the other 14 arayis to Chaisisha like we learned in the beginning of the parak? Just like a chaysisha is distinct, that's an erva, and zadin is karas, and shaykik is chatas, and it's asa for yibum, so to all the other rayas. What do you mean? Akshin le'eshazach. Eshazach is also an erva, and eshazach is permitted to do yibum. So why compare it to a chaysisha compared to eshazach, and say all the other 13 arayas are going to be permitted to do yibum? So the Gemara has two answers. If you want, you could say when you can compare something leniently or stringently. We compare it stringently because you don't know, so we go stringently. If you want, you could say a different answer. Hacha by chayis ishta is trei isuri. There's two prohibitions, right? There's the erva b'chayis isha, and there's also that of the ishazach. And bahacha by all the other rights are also trei isuri, right? It's bitoy or it's achis imoy, whatever it is, and it's ishazach. Betray, you learn out the one that has two isurim from the one that has two isurim. Is only one erva, the erva of Eshazach. But train mechad leifin, not learn out that which has two from that which has one to say it's mutter, and therefore that two answers why we compare all the rice to Chayis Ishtay and not to Eshazach. Now the Gemara says a third approach to answer the question, or it's really all the questions, and specifically what do I need a leha for? So Rav Hama, he says, erva, and this is going back to what we started Daf Gimel, the discussion. He says, erva lo tzricha kra. So the truth is, for erva, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that there's an isser to do yibum. Where for sure it's going to be awesome. And you're right, I don't need a leha. What would I need a leha for? He says, the positive command of yibum is not going to override the negative prohibition that has cars of achais ishtay. So he says, you're right. He says, you don't need a leha. Ki yitzrach kra. When do I need the pasuk of a leha? Is lameser tzara, is actually to tell me that is a isser regarding the tzara, because if you're going to look at the pasuk, some Gemaras have the pasuk on the side. It says v'isha la'chaysa, a woman to her sister, le'sikach, don't take litzrar, legalas ravasa aleha b'chayah. So if you read the pasuk, aleha is telling me litzrar. So telling me that the tzara is going to be aser. Taisa really says the Rebbe never had such a havamina, and the Gemara's discussion really in the conclusion we'll see what he meant to say. But for now, at least, it sounds like that Rebbe is telling you that the isra of tzara is what I have to learn from Allah. That's litzar is with Allah, because that I wouldn't have known. Why would the co-wife be forbidden to do yibum? She didn't do anything. She's not an erva. That's what I need from Allah. Of course, I don't need Allah. And I say says the Gemara. The Everly so, and the Ever doesn't need a pasuk to exclude it from Yibam. But Vatanya, when the Bryce recorded this in Dav Gimel, I would only know the Ever is forbidden. How do I know, etc.? What do you mean? What are you saying, Eli? What do you mean? You're not learning out the Ever herself. So it says the Gemara, no, that's Mishum Tzirasa. Because we wanted to say Tzirasa Minai, how do we know that Tzara is Aser? So we say Eli. But of course, I don't need a limud for the Ever. Of course I know. And I say Douglas Eshbekars. So the Gemara says a similar question. We're learning the Brayz Ainli Lehain. I would only know them that arise. So the Gemara, no, that's Mishum Tzur. They say that's because of the Tzars. But again, the Erva itself is a double Pashit. You cannot do Yibim because in us a Deichel Lois because. But the Gemara continues to ask Tashema from the following Brayz. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi's expounding the pasuk in Devarim that talks about when Kiyesh V'Achim Yachta, when there's brothers and one of them dies and he doesn't have a son. So the wife of the one who died cannot go marry a foreigner. It says Yevamos Daf, her Yavam should cohabit with her, and he should take her as a wife and v'yibman do yibmtar. So Rabbi makes a diuk that the truth is, it could have said v'lokach isha v'yibim, and instead it says ulekacha loy isha v'yibma. It says ulekacha, and instead it could have said v'yibim, and it says v'yibma. Now the word lekacha sounds like a miut. You take her and not another one. What's that coming to tell us? Lesser tsaras va'arayas. It's coming to say that it's forbidden to marry the tsaras and the arayas. These are two miutim. Lekacha, take her, v'yibma, do yibim to her. So you were excluding tsaras and arayas. So wait a second, you see you have to be married arayas. I thought you told me we don't need a miut for arayas. You see Rabbi's telling us a miut. Says the Gemara, no, aim is say lesser tsaras shel arayas. It's not the girsa. It's not to be lesser tsaras va'arayas. Actually, the order actually would sound like that because you would say first arayis and tsaras. So why say tsaras v'arayis? It actually doesn't mean tsaras and arayis. It means tsaras shel arayis. But of course, arayis I don't need to have a meat for. Says the Gemara, how could you say it's tsaras shel arayis? But trei kroi kanasavlei. I mean, there's two psukim, meaning in that same pasuk there's two miyutim, lekacha and yevamah. My love chala ever chala tzara. Isn't one excluding the ever, one excluding the tzar? How can you say it's the tzars of the arayis, which only seem to be one miyut? There's two miyutim in the pasuk. So no, it's not true. Both of those verses, those words, are referring to the tzara. But what do I need two miyutim? Actually, one's not a miyut. Chad, it is a miyut, but in a different way. Chad l'meisen tzara b'makam mitzvah. One is coming to say that the tzara is forbidden in the situation of a mitzvah of yibum, where then she's actually going to be eishes achiv. One actually is coming to say that she's permitted when it's not a mitzvah situation. Meaning when, let's say, a person's daughter is married to a guy, Charlie, and he has another wife, so then this father is going to be permitted when Charlie dies to marry that co-wife. There's no problem. It's only by b'moka mitzvah, by his brother. His brother is married to his daughter and to another woman, then that tzara becomes forbidden of Eishes Ach. That's the Issa of tzara. So it's from the ribuy of the pasuk of the Yevamot that we darshan, as the Gemara explains. My time, what's the reason to understand the pasuk when it says v'yibim and instead of saying v'yibim it says v'yibma? What's that coming to tell us? That only b'mokim yibum it's a miut. V'yibma is saying how you do yibum to, meaning b'mokim yibum. When we're being memayit, that's where I'm going to tell you the mir of l'kacha, meaning the yibma is qualifying the mir of l'kacha to be memayit at tzara. When am I telling you that you're going to have the miut? There's only b'makom yibum hu dasir tzara. But shalei b'makom yibum. For example, let's say the tzara of his daughter from a random person, then shar yitzara. Then the tzara is going to be permitted. Meaning, you would have thought to say that actually would be the opposite. You would say that when we have the isser of tzara, you would say, okay, that would be when are they both forbidden? Shalei b'makom mitzvah, when there's no reason to be lenient. And when would you say that one person is forbidden and the tzara would be permitted? You'd say that would be b'makom mitzvah, that would be a reason to be lenient. Therefore, we actually need to have a source to tell you that no, that these two psukim, the lekacha is coming to exclude that of the tzara. It's saying you take her and you're not going to take a certain one. That's to say that the tzara of the erva you're not going to do yibum on. And when we're saying that is the yibma. Only b'makom yibum is when we're having the mir of the tzara. But shalei b'makom yibum, actually, then you would be permitted the tzara of the erva. So that's they're both. That's not referring to the erva. The erva is forbidden without a pasuk. I don't need a leha. I don't need anything to be made that of the erva. It's the tzara that a leha is coming to make forbidden. But when am I saying that? I'm saying that only when it's going to be. That was one source that we said. And then Rebbe also, meaning we're answering on both these questions that we don't need a source for erva. The Rebbe who learns that from lekacha and v'yibma two miyutim, we're saying one is lekacha dermayit the tzara, and v'yibma is just qualifying, saying that isra is only b'makom yibma. And Amar Rav Ashi says masnit namadaike. It says our mission is also precise like Rabba that erva was pasha. Why? Because they're telling us mishnah chamesha sinashim 15 women pointers sort of saying they exempt their tzaras. Now the ilu betudos the pointers like it doesn't tell us that they are pater and they're going to also pater. So why doesn't it say peturos? No, obviously we infer from that we don't need to tell you that, because the fact that they're pater, I knew from Svara, because I say is not derech just because it was the peturos that I had to tell you that they're going to patris, that they're going to exempt the tzaras. That's the chiddush, and that's what we learn from Sukkah. Now it says the Gemara, umayshno erva. What's the pshat according to Rava that the erva herself delays tzricha kra, which does not need a pasuk? Why are you saying this? Because the Eina say because the positive commandment of Yibum is not going to override the negative prohibition of cars. If that's the case, so anomaly to buy a car, the tzar should also not need the pasuk of Allah. The positive commandment cannot override negative prohibition that has cars, meaning because the pasuk said litzra. The pasuk says b'chais ishtoi, the word litzra, which sounds like that you cannot marry not the achais isha, not the tzara. And it says at the end of all the parasha barayis that it's going to be a punishment of karas. So if that's the case, so that means to say that she is like she herself is included in the pasuk of karas, because the pasuk is telling you that litzra includes not only the prohibition of achayis, it also includes that of the tzara. So why would I think to say that tzara would be permitted, that I need a leha to come to exclude from that? But why do I need a leha even for the tzara? The tzara hara is also including the erva of a chaysishtay where it says litzra. So why do I need a pasuk to tell you that you can't do yibum? Of course you can't do yibum. She's also an erva sheish bekars. So Ravacha bar Bibi bar Ravine says like this. And this is Tai says as actually was all along what Rava had meant. Tzara namalitza kra. You're right. You don't need a pasuk not for that of the erva, and you don't need a pasuk not for that of the tzara. So, and the reason that is because a tzara is also an eishes ach, whatever, a chais isha, it depends how you say it, but it's including the erva of litzrar that it has cars. Kitzur kra, actually, when do I need a pasuk for the tzara, to continue on the base, is actually the mishri tzara shalei b'makom mitzvah. It's actually coming to tell me that a tzara is going to be permitted when there's no mitzvah. Meaning because had we not written the leha to compare it to the leha in the mitzvah of yibum, I would have actually said, and as I was trying to explain this before, that we would have learned out from Litzrar that the tzar v'chais isha would be forbidden in all situations like a chais ishtay. That's actually would have been the havamina. As the Gemara says that my time, what's the reason? In other words, how can you darshan a heter from over here? Because Amakra, the pasuk is saying Aleha. What's it saying? So b'makim Aleha, when it says Aleha, that's where it says Litzrar, that's where that's going to be forbidden for the tzar, because Aleha tells you Yevamo Aleha, and that's the same word Aleha that we say by Chis Ishtoi. litzra legalsa versa leha b'chayeha. So that's going to tell me that that's where it's forbidden. When it's not a leha, then actually sharia, then actually the tzara b'chis ishta is actually going to be permitted, and that's why you need a leha to qualify and tell me that the isser of the tzara is only going to be the makom that of the mitzvah yibum. But actually, when it's not b'makom mitzvah, again, I would have thought to say that it should be more problematic shalai b'makom mitzvah. There's no reason to be lenient, but b'makom mitzvah, then you have a reason to be lenient, and then actually maybe the tzara should be permitted. No, Allah is qualifying and telling me, when do I say this? Halacha of litzra is only b'makom allow. What's b'makom allow? A different pasuk. It gets confusing. But there's a pasuk Yevamos Daf that the pasuk, the mitzvah yibum, is we use that word aleha to refer to mitzvah yibum. And when it says the isra of b'chais isha, the isra of the erva, it also says the word aleha. To tell me, when do I say the isra of litzra is only b'makom mitzvah yibum. Shaloi b'makom mitzvah yibum, actually then there's not going to be any isra of tzara of b'chais isha. That's what's necessary for. So you don't need, according to this interpretation, any pasuk not to exclude the erva and not to exclude the tzara either, because the tzara I know, right? It has a punishment of curse. It's included in the erva of a chaysishta, because litzra says that. Narvas, I need the pasuk actually to tell me that there's a heter of the tzara of a chaysishta shalai b'makom mitzvah. Interesting. You would have thought to say that a tzara is like her own erva of a chaysishta, because it says litzra, and the chaysishta includes the tzara. The co-wife is just like the chaysishta, which we learn all other rayas from Achais Ishtay too. So it's like a new erva, and then we're saying that no, b'makom mitzvah it's going to be mutter. I mean, shalei b'makom mitzvah is going to be mutter. The erva is only b'makom aleh. In aleha, then you have this erva of tzara. But shalei b'makom mitzvah, you don't have this erva of tzara. However, the Gemara continues and asks, he says, if that's the case, im erva gufei, then say also regarding the erva herself. Shalei b'makom mitzvah tishtari, when it's not a mitzvah situation, the erva should be permitted, because you told me aleha means b'makom the mitzvah of yibum. So, but that pasuk of aleha is not only going on litzra, it's going on the chaysishta herself. And so maybe actually you're going to say that only b'makom mitzvah of yibum is when you're going to say that there's the erva of a chaysishta. But shalei b'makom aleha, it's actually going to be mutter to marry a chaysishta. Just like you're saying by the tzara. Says the Gemara, no, a kabel chaymer, who isn't a kabel chaymer? But mokem mitzvah sidam, when there's a mitzvah situation, you're telling me it's a mitzvah to marry the sister-in-law, the eishes ach, and still you tell me if she's a chaysishta is forbidden. Shalei b'mokem mitzvah shari. So when it's not a mitzvah situation, you tell me it's going to be permitted. So Amalei says, what do you mean tzara techiach? Tzara could disprove what you just said. Because b'mokem mitzvah sira, we said that tzara only when there's a mitzvah is an aser. Shalei b'mokem mitzvah shari, when his daughter is married to Charlie and then he dies, he's permitted to the tzara. It's only forbidden if Charlie's his brother. So you see that you can't say such a kabel chaymer, because we see from tzara it's not like that. So Malay says, Alecha makra, for you the pasuk said, b'chayeha. Meaning the pasuk again, which we're repeating a lot, says a woman to her sister, isha l'chesa, le'sikach, don't take litzrar, which again, the way we translate it here in the Talmud is the halacha of tzara, legalas ravasa aleha, to reveal, to have an intimate relationship aleha with her b'chayeha. What does that mean b'chayeha? Which kosher b'chayeha. As long as she's alive, if your wife is alive, you're not allowed to marry her sister. Which obviously telling us that even shalei b'makom mitzvah, you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister. It's not, you can't say shalei b'makom mitzvah, it's going to be permitted, because b'chayeha is telling you that as long as she's alive, you're forbidden to be married to these two sisters. Says Gemara, what do you mean? You need it for something else. That's actually coming to tell us that after his wife dies, he's actually permitted to marry his wife's sister. That's what Mechayah is coming to teach. It's not coming to teach you that Shalei b'makom is going to be usher, that as long as she's alive. No, it's going to say, but only when she's alive. But maybe even when she's alive, it's going to be mutter Shalei b'makom mitzvah. How do you know? How do you learn from Mechayah? Says Gemara, no, hahi, that lacha misa is mutter is mebeisha lachayis nafka. We learn from the first part of the pasuk. A woman to her sister, which means to say only when the sister's around. When the sister passed away, then we'd be permitted. So what do I learn from Bechayah? To tell me as long as she's alive, it's going to be us, and therefore I couldn't have learned it, like you want to say that just like tzara, that the erva should be mutter shel b'makom mitzvah. But the Gemara says, wait a second, even b'ishal achesa, it's not true. It wouldn't suffice to learn it from a woman to her sister. Because if that's the pasuk you would have learned it out from, how I would have thought to say this garsha, if let's say he divorces his wife, sharia, should also be permitted. It's not isha l'chaisa, it's not married to her anymore. Tamalayma, that's what you need b'chayeha, to take kosher b'chayeha, as long as she's alive, davka in this garsha, even though she's divorced, loy not. So again, b'chayeha is not extra to tell me that it's always going to be forbidden as long as she's alive, even she'll be malka mitzvahs. I'm back to the question. Why is the ever different than the tzara? The tzara, you tell me, need a leha to tell you that b'malka mitzvahs, asr shlai malka mitzvahs, is going to be mutter. So why don't you say something about a sister herself? A sister, you say the same thing. The wife's sister is only forbidden in the situation of a mitzvah. Shalom b'malka mitzvah, a leha is qualified in the pasuk. Maybe you're allowed to marry your wife's sister-in-law. When the shlai malka mitzvah, you can marry two sisters. Only asr and then it's situation of the mitzvah of yibum. So Ela Rado Amar Rav Huna Bar Tachliv Mishmei Derava says Trei Kroik Sidi. There's two psukim that are written. Now, originally, in the beginning, Siv, it says in the pasuk, Isha l'chaysa l'sik litzah. He's breaking up the pasuk into two parts. The first part of the pasuk says, a woman to her sister, you should not take litzra. Now, that sounds like you cannot marry the sister-in-law, and you cannot marry the co-wife. Then, the problem is, Siv, it says at the end of the pasuk, Legalis ervasa. That's singular. The chadam mashma. That sounds like one woman is forbidden. So how do you explain the pasuk? You're telling me litzra with the sister, which are two different women, and then you tell me a singular of ervasa. So how ketza? So it says the Gemara. I'll tell you. The makom mitzvah and the mitzvah situation, shtei and asudas, they're both going to be forbidden, because as Rashi explains, like when they wrote the word aleha, which sounds like that litzra is only in the situation of aleha when there's ibun. Shalai b'makom mitzvah, but when it's not a mitzvah situation, so then he asara but tzaras materes. Then she's going to be forbidden, but the tzara is going to be permitted. So therefore, this is the source for this halacha that we find that when is the tzara going to be forbidden? The tzara is going to be forbidden only when it's b'makom mitzvah, because aleha is qualifying the halacha of litzra. Litzra, legal sarvasa leha b'chayah. That's when they're both going to be forbidden. And what's with the singular terminology of legal sarvasa that only one woman is forbidden? Oh, that's going to go shalai b'makom mitzvah. That only the chayis ish is going to be forbidden, but the tzara is going to be permitted. So how do you know that? I can say the opposite. B'makom mitzvah, in the situation of a mitzvah, he has to do with tzaras materes. She's forbidden, and the tzara is permitted. Because actually Rashi says that actually would make actually more sense. Because the word, it's very technical. You want to be looking at the pasuk as we're saying this, so you understand what the Gemara's having and what the Gemara's maskan is. When it says aleha, if you look at the pasuk, aleha, it's actually going on the words legalas or avasa, which that sounds like only one is forbidden. And that would actually be appropriate to darshan. When there's aleha, that's when, and what's aleha? That's b'makom mitzvah. That's when we're only going to make one woman, legalas ravasa, forbidden. Now, the word of litzra actually sounds like that's the one shalai b'makom mitzvah. So actually, maybe shalai b'makom mitzvah shtein asuras. So that's the opposite. Maybe shalai b'makom mitzvah both should be permitted, and b'makom mitzvah only one should be forbidden because it's a mitzvah. Maybe that's when the tzara is actually going to be permitted. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, lo yemer Allah. Then you don't need Allah. That's actually what this tablet is showing, that without Allah also, if you would have a difficulty in the psukim, in that same pasuk, you would answer from logic that the heter is when the situation of mitzvah, and the is is when there's no situation of mitzvah. So therefore Allah is coming to tell us a chiddush, to expound and tell me that it's going on litzra, and to tell me that the tzara is going to be forbidden only b'makom mitzvah, like an erva, and therefore we have resolved that we said Allah really is only needed to say that a tzara is forbidden b'makom mitzvah. That's how Rava explains the pasuk. That's the third interpretation what Allah is necessary for. Allah is necessary not to say that erva is forbidden, not to say that tzara is forbidden. Because that I know from Ein Lasei Dechel Leisesh B'Karetz. It's actually only coming to teach me that the Isser is only b'makom mitzvah, but shalei b'makom mitzvah, that is going to be a heter. Now, however, the Gemara asks, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, "B'may dehayolel li surah." How do you know that the leha is coming to say that the tzara is forbidden, and meaning not just the erva, the malehetera? Maybe Allah is coming to say that both are permitted b'makom mitzvah. And how are you going to explain the pasuk? This is what the Torah is saying. Isha l'chaysa l'sikach litzor, a woman to her sister should not take to cause a competition, which is loihi v'litzor asa. That is shlei b'makom aleha. Aval b'makom aleha, which is the situation when it's a mitzvah. Shtei mutaris. Maybe both of them are going to be permitted, even when she's alive. You're going to fulfill the halacha of Yevamos Daf of Yibum. Maybe that's how you're going to read the pasuk. So there's two halves of the pasuk. Isha l'chayis l'sikach litzor. That's the prohibition when it's shlei b'makom mitzvah. B'makom mitzvah is aleha, telling me that you're going to have the heter like you have aleha by Yibum. You're going to say the same aleha, not that there's isser b'chayis ishtay. That tell you that you're going to have the mitzvah of Yibum. Says the Gemara Mekain, if that's the case, legalis erva, the chada. But we had made a diak. We said that there's a situation of when it says legalis ervasa, which is singular, which sounds like only one woman is going to be forbidden, which we said that's going to be the chayis ishtay. Hechem mishkachas. When you're ever going to have that only one of the two is going to be forbidden? Even makom mitzvah, what it means, shtei mutaris. You want to tell me that both are going to be permitted? And nish lego makom mitzvah, shtei asur, they're both forbidden. So obviously, it's like we explained that it's the way we interpreted that b'makom mitzvah, they're both aser. Shaloi b'makom mitzvah, that's when only the erva is going to be forbidden, but the tzara is going to be permitted. So we had three answers, ultimately, but the Gemara concluded finally, what do you need aleha for? The first interpretation was to tell me that arayos are forbidden. Why do I need to tell arayos forbidden? I know, what would have been the havim I need aleha? So we said, you would have thought to say, hol ve'ishtri ishtri. And we said it's in a limited case. If let's say the brother who married one sister, he married and he died. And then before the brother did Yibum, he married her sister. Now he made a chayis ishtri. So since it was really permitted for him to marry that, his brother's almana, because the Isser of Eishes was already permitted, so I would think to say, hol ve'ishtri ishtri, also now that it's a chayis ishtri. That was what you need a leha for, to tell you that even then it's going to be forbidden. Answer number two was Hekeshet Rabbi Yomi, which is that Rabbi Yomi says that all the arayos, v'nichutzu kol ha'nafashas ha'oises, all those ha'oised kol ha'ta'ebes ha'ela, all of them are included. They're compared one to the other. So just like Eishes Ach is permitted, I would have thought to say all arayos are going to be also permitted for the mitzvah of Yibum. That's why he needed to say Allah to tell you that no, that achayis ishta is forbidden, and we learn that all other rayas from achayis ishta, like we had two pshat in the Gemara. Why? And the third answer the Gemara gave right now was that you're right. I don't need to tell you that an erva, and neither I need to even tell you that Sarah is forbidden to do Yibum, because achayis ishta is an erva of asay v'loisei shish b'karas. I wouldn't think that asay Yibum deichid, and even that Sarah is included in litzror, that is also forbidden, because v'nichus kol nafash is going on litzror also. So then why do we need a leha? I need a leha to tell you that actually that tzara is going to be permitted shaloi b'makom mitzvah. I would have thought to say that the tzara is just like the erva, and she is an erva to you. The tzara of the litzra of a chayis ishta is a tzara in the Torah. Kum to leha to tell me it's only b'makom aleha that the isra of tzara applies. Shaloi b'makom aleha, no, then the isra of tzara does not apply, and then the tzara's erva is going to be permitted. Shaloi b'makom mitzvah. That's the three interpretations that ends this sugya of aleha that we started in the beginning of this paragraph. Now, Kufa, the Gemara goes back to explain something we had mentioned in passing before. Rabbi Eimer, he had said, the pasuk says in Devarim, which again, this pasuk is the mitzvah of Yibum. It says that when the brother dies without any children, Yevamos Daf, he should take her as a wife and do Yibum. Now, as we had pointed out, Amid Al, Rebbe says, the Lokach, it could have said, Lukacha, and it says he should take her. The Yibum, it could have said, it says, V'yibma, and he should do Yibum to her. Which, that's a miyut, which we didn't explain it so well in Amid Al, because we're explaining it really over here, is less tzaras va'arayis. So you have two miyutim, to make tzaras and arayis forbidden, which again, we had reinterpreted that you don't need a miyut for arayis. So he said, actually, it's less tzaras shel arayis. And you have two psukim. L'kacha says you take her and not the other one, which is saying that you're not going to marry a tzara. That's only going to be the yibma in the mokum of yibum. When that's not in the mokum of yibum, so it's qualifying to l'kacha, then you won't have a problem about not marrying the tzara. Then you actually will be able to marry the tzara. Okay, but one thing says the Gemara to explain this teaching of Rabbi that midi tzar's ksiva hacha. Where does it say anything about a tzara over here? How are you learning out tzaras from this pasuk? V'oy moro with tzaras melitzra nafka. We know this from Daf Gimel. We said that we know it from litzra. That's how we know tzaras. Why is it learning it from this pasuk? Says the Gemara, that's not difficult. Litzra mapigle Rabbi l'kedib Shimon. Rabbi learns out tzaras. He used the word litzra to teach you something else like Reb Shimon. This Reb Shimon is later on Perek Dal Achmed Daf Chav Ches and Beis, where it's talking about three brothers. Two of them are married to two sisters, or to a woman and a daughter, and those two brothers died. Now the third brother now has his he has two sisters, or a mother and a daughter, falling for him for Yevamot at the same time. So since they both are zakuk, they both have a zika bond to him from the two brothers' marriages. Zika is like a partial kedushin. It's like a quasi type of engagement. If he's going to do Yevamot to one of them, he's going to be marrying Achaysa Kukasai B'chayah. He's going to be marrying the sister of the woman that he's already has a zika bond when she's still alive. Now a zukuk is like a wife. So you can't do Yevamot to the other one. It's like a Achaysa Ishtar. But you still need chalitza because it's not so strong, the zika bond, to make it like literally like a Achaysa to say that you could just let her go, because Achaysa doesn't have a zika at all. No, each one has this quasi type of halacha. Now, we learned in the Brayso, Reb Shimon actually says, they are both exempt from chalitza and from yibum. Why? Why would he say it's exempt from chalitza? Zika is not like a isha to say that the sister that's falling for yibum at the same time as Achaysa. So he actually learns that from the word litzra, which that's what we're saying. Rebbe would use litzra for that also, not to tell us the halacha of tzaras arba. Because what litzra tells us is that when they're both tzaras to each other, like over here, where the two sisters, the pasuk of litzra is in the pasuk of Achayis Ishtai. Isha l'chayis l'sikach litzra legal zavasa. When the two sisters are tzaras through a zika, then it tells us, what does the pasuk say? That then you cannot marry her, which is Isha l'chayis l'sikach litzra. You can't take sikach is like the lashon of lekuchen, which lekuchen always refers to kiikach ishas isha, refers to marriage. Then you cannot marry even one of them. So it's excluding the halacha from yibum totally, from this halacha of litzra. So it's not difficult. What does he do with litzra? I thought we know tzaras from litzra. No, he doesn't learn that tzaras from litzra. He learns that the Reb Shimon's drush from litzra. But then the Gemara still has the first question. Tzara hacha ksiv. Where does it say over here in this pasuk regarding tzaras? It says the Gemara hacha. This is what Rebbe was saying. In Cain, if that's the case, that this lukacha is coming to teach us regarding the halacha itself of yibum le'mekrabalokach. You should say balokach my lukacha. That sounds like the way Rashi explains that if you're saying you should take her, it obviously sounds like that two women are falling to him from his brother, and the Torah is telling you lukacha, take her, meaning take one and not both, which teaches us the following halacha. Whenever there's two women to marry, meaning if either one would be the iboyinas of high, if you want, you could marry either one of them, that's where sharia, that's when each one of them is going to be permitted. But if you don't say ulakacha by both of them, for example, let's say one of them is an erva, then tarvayu asidin, then both of them are going to be forbidden, meaning even the tzara. Meaning, how do I see tzara over here? I see from ulakacha, you should take har. I mean, har sounds like her and not the other one. Yeah, because you only do yibum one. But that means to say I was able to take one and the other one. So that's only then I could do it. But if one of them I cannot take, then that means that the other one is a tzara of an erva. Then you can't take either one of them. Which actually Rashi says is a very important yesod, which actually fits right into which someone was telling me on Shabbos, the famous Rabbi Ege, where what does it mean tzara? You never really have it tzara. So Rebbe would have a source for tzara. What's the source for tzara? Meaning we had said in Daf Gimel that how do we know tzara from litzra? It doesn't say lotzur, it says litzra. But according to Rebbe, you're only learning out from lukacha, you learn out the tzara. How do you know that tzara is also going to be? So Rashi explains, tzara is saying you also learn out from over here. Why? Because when the tzaras erva fell to him from his first brother, and she got rejected as an erva from him, as a tzara, so now she becomes eternally an eishesach. She remains with the erva of eishesach without a mitzvah yibum, like what's called eshach shesh libana. When she then does yibum to his second brother, and he has another wife, and then he dies, and now again she falls for him, this tzara, you cannot recite by the one that became forbidden as ulukacha, because she was already forbidden as the tzaras erva. Now that she's married to another brother, and that tzaras erva has her own tzara, they're both going to be forbidden because of the erva of Eishasach, and that continues indefinitely. That's Rabbi Kivega's question. That, what do you mean? So you never really need a source of tzara. Every tzara is her own erva, and then why would I need a litzra? But that's what Rashi is explaining over here, at least for Rebbe, that you don't have a source with tzara, you don't need a source, because every tzara is her own erva of Eishasach, and then that continues indefinitely. But that's ulakacha. Now what's v'yibma? What's that coming to teach us? That's qualifying. Like we said, b'makom yibum, where there's it's only b'makom yibum that the tzara is forbidden. Shalom b'makom yibum, shar tzara. But if it's not in a yibum situation, then actually the tzara is going to be permitted. Which again, we had learned out from Aleha. Rebbe doesn't learn it out from Aleha, and he doesn't even learn litzra as a tzaras erva. So Aleha is not qualifying the tzaras erva. That's why it was a little complicated, I think, on Omen Aleph. When we explained this, there's two different. Rebbe's not going with this whole litzra. He expounds litzra in a different way. The litzra is not too much tzaras erva, and therefore obviously Aleha is not qualifying that, and therefore that wouldn't go with that pshat of Aleha is coming to tell you, as pshat number 3, to tell you it's shiur shaloi b'makom mitzvah, because he's learning at tzaras not from litzra. He's learning at tzaras from B'lakacha. And he's actually, what we learn that from Aleha, he's learning it from V'yibma. To tell us that when is Lukacha, this halacha of tzara being asur, because you cannot marry one of them, is only b'makom mitzvah. V'yibma. B'makom yibum. But shalei b'makom yibum, then you're not going to have a problem about tzaras erva. We learned it out from Aleha. That's qualifying litzra. Rebbe doesn't learn litzra for that. He learns a litzra for the halacha of Rabbi Shimon, which we said that when you have a chayse kukasas falling at the same time, they're tzaras zubazika, but then it patters them totally, even from mechalitza, unlike that of the Rabban. But be that as it may, the Gemara continues and says, but Rabbanan, that again they learned out this halacha that Rebbe's learning out from Lukacha and the Yibba, they learned it out, as we said just a moment ago, from Aleha and Litzrar. So Hai Lukacha, my Abdullah, what do they do with Lukacha? Yeah, you could have said Lukach, what's the extra hay for? So the Gemara, what Rabbi Yisrael says. Then Rabbi Yisrael says, Lukacha, that's coming to teach us a different halacha. That when he takes her, meaning after he gets married to her, she becomes like his wife. Malamadis comes to teach if he wants to divorce her, Shemigar Shemeget. That he divorces her. Remember, this is by the pasuk of Yibam. It says Yevamos Daf, Lukacha is coming to tell us that there's a marriage over here, and that if he wants to divorce her, he can divorce her with a get, and he doesn't have to do chalitza. Lukacha is telling us that there's like a lekuchen. Lekuchen always refers to kedushin. Ki yikach ish isha. So that's teaching Lukacha, and also umachzira. If he wants to remarry her, he's allowed to remarry her. Why would I think not? I would think not. I would say, wait a second. You already did the mitzvah, and now you divorced her. Now she goes back to being Isra Ishazach. She's your brother's wife. It's only permitted b'makom mitzvah when you divorce her. You're done with that. Therefore, I have to say Lukacha le'isha, that once he did lekuchen, she becomes like his wife for all practical purposes. That's what Lukacha comes to teach. And what does V'yibma come to teach? Al karcha. It comes V'yibma, he'll do yibum to her, meaning if the Yavam cohabits with her, even if he coerces her, he acquires her and he inherits her, and he can be matamata, like for all practical purposes. With that bia, she's like his wife. That's what they learn from Lukacha and V'yibma. Says Gemara, and Rebbe, what does he do with that? How does he know these halachas? So the Rebbe is Rav Chanina that she's going to be like his wife, all halachas, which he learns out from Lukacha. He learns out from Meleisha Nafka, not from Lukacha. Lukacha, he learns out from, you have to have 2 lekuchen. He learns out from the word Leisha, that she becomes like a wife. And the halacha of Al-Karcha is Meivama Yavay Leha Nafka. From the pasuk, the words before, the words right before Lukacha says Yevamos Yavay Leha. He's going to come on her, which means to even Bal-Karcha. But V'yibma is not teaching that, because V'yibma, according to him, is qualifying that from Lukacha. To say that this halacha of being able to marry both women, and not that woman's forbidden because of an erva, because that actually would make the tzara forbidden, that's only V'yibma b'makom yibum. But shalei b'makom yibum, it actually would be permitted, so therefore you cannot learn out V'yibma to tell Bal-Karcha. It's actually the words Yevamos Yavay Leha. Thank you to any time for hosting us.